hard to have sit-down at tables in a private home.
It will,
It's
right.
just, you don't have that in a
And so
private
that's
home.
why if we knew there were 30 or 40 people, we would
Yeah.
have more of a presentation style kind of format. And, you know, we would be soliciting input from where they might be seated, and we would be recording or writing what they're viewing. You know, so that's how we would we'd have to adapt.
I would be so thrilled if 30 or 40 people would
I
come.
would be thrilled to.
No, wouldn't it be wonderful, but I'm just thinking,
Yes.
just,
Yeah.
it could be fine, you know? It could
Yeah,
be
and
like
if it's 5, we can be around
two
the
of us and
table,
you
and,
guys
you know,
and one
people can really
person.
get into it.
Probably more likely maybe 10, 15.
That's kind of what I was imagining.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great size. So, but yeah, I think if we just are hearing the day before, what kind of RSVPs you're getting, so we get a sense if something's gonna be very big or very small, I think that'll be fine. We can adapt.
So, is it, question. You've got your 3 options here. When you said you'd be presenting it, would you
Yes.
be presenting it up to this point? In other words, like
Yes,
the lead up would
Yes.
be what we did at the first workshop.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Because, you know, there will be people, I'm assuming, who didn't come to the first workshop. This is gonna be their first exposure. So we're gonna make sure that every meeting starts with an introduction that kind of grounds everybody in how we got to this point and what's already been looked at. So we'll prepare that, probably have a couple boards to illustrate some of the things that people marked up at the meeting and whatnot. Okay, so what we want to go over today, when we last met, we brought some sort of big idea graphics to just sort of test, you know, what are the big, you know, ideas that are going to form the 3 options. And we got lots of really terrific input. But then we went back and we're like, all our input is kind of morphing them all together into one option, and we still need 3. So what we did was we tried to organize the comments and ideas from the last discussion with the committee members that were here and pull them back apart into 3 distinct options that tested different concepts. And you know, we looked at them as what are the big ideas, the big organizing principles that differentiate each of the 3 options that we want to test at the outreach meetings. So we've come back with 3 different options that have a series of sort of very distinct moves that make them clearly different from each other. Okay, so.
Can I make a suggestion? When you have a public meeting, I think it would be good to have a chart showing what was there together.
Yes, and we will do that, and we will have several boards that kind of, no.
So if you had one of these that would be existing,
Exactly,
that would be exactly like this,
Yep.
and existing, I think would be really helpful.
yeah, so I think what we're gonna be doing over the next week after today is doing exactly that, kind of preparing all of the graphic materials that we know we wanna bring and have, and organizing them so that we can do the introduction properly, figure out how to set up the room so that certain boards that set context kind of stay there while we're going through options, so we will definitely bring all that together. So option by option, so the other thing I want to mention before we go into each option is give you a sense of, we're not going to bring something that looks like this. This is kind of dull and boring and it looks very finished, right? But we need to do this to get our base set. This is just kind of example, you know, it's going to be more colorful, loosely sketched, big labels. You know, it's going to be a lot looser like this when we finish the boards. But we need to make sure that what we're proposing actually works. And, you know, we understand which trees would come down and how the roads would go and did we fit the parking. But when we prepare it for the actual meetings, we'll be doing an overlay, adding color and labels so that people can easily differentiate green space from paved areas, from streets and parking. So, option 1. So the big moves in option 1, which should be your first page of your handout, are it's a subgrade parking structure. So the majority of parking is accommodated underground, under the main building footprint to the left. And it's getting as many things as we can into one large building, so police, building department, public works, there's the council chambers is its own building but kind of in the same plaza, with the library off to the side more in the park area. You can see that the other major aspect of this plan is that Station Lane does not go all the way through, it stops. But Ashfield Road bends and goes out to Fair Oaks and tries to regularize that the Fair Oaks Lane intersection with Station Lane more of a regular kind of Y intersection. We try and clean that up a little bit. We do not move the existing station, but we do demolish the existing council chambers in this scheme. And we leave the public works yard
That came up last
essentially.
time.
No.
In their public outreach, they said nobody cared about it.
No, they didn't.
That's true.
So this is so,
Join the council chamber?
No, nobody cared to keep it.
so
But,
here's a
I mean,
scheme,
it was, there were comments of people that
Yeah.
liked it.
like the
But
facade
it
or
was
something, you know.
surprisingly less significant
Yeah,
than we expected.
Very few people ever come in.
right. So,
Maybe,
so
I don't know.
here's the option that says, did you mean that? Because it's gone.
Well, okay,
You
so
know,
what do you want? Do you want us to respond, to react?
So
Now, can you go through all
I
of
wanna
them?
go through
Just
all of
give
them
us a-
so that you
yeah.
can understand the
Before
big
we do-
differences.
yes, yes.
And then I'll,
Yeah.
as I do that, I will let you know what kind of feedback we're looking for
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
So those are the major moves in option one and how they are going to be different from the other options. So when we go to option two, there is no underground parking. Everything is accommodated as surface parking. Station lane is carried through, but it's modified to try and work with some existing trees, slow down the traffic, get more parking along station lane for convenience purposes. Every building in this scheme is 1 story, whereas in the other scheme packed together, some buildings were 2-story. And you can see again, Ashfield Road is curving through and meeting that other intersection. We've cleaned up Station Lane and Fair Oaks' intersection, but in this case, we are moving the existing train station, which frankly, we don't know if we can do, but it's an option. And we're trying to create, you know, kind of a clustered effect of the 1-story buildings to keep the scale down and spread them out a bit more. And in this case, we are keeping this building, but we're making it part of the library program. So we've broken up the library into chunks connected by secured breezeways or some other way. But just again, keeping the scale of all the built structures down in a village-like atmosphere. And Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I just want to emphasize was the existing parking is form, there's a classic statement, form follows function, but in reality, form very often follows parking. And on scheme number 1, you have 161 existing spaces on your Civic campus right now. I noticed today is the first time I've noticed it, but it seems
It was
filled
full.
up, is filled up.
Including back behind the police.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is filled up.
Lots of contractors.
So,
Contract.
Yeah, it's contract.
We have asked most of the contractors to not impact the neighborhoods. They use this parking lot as a convenience. If we told them they can't impact the neighborhoods and this wasn't here, they would have to make other accommodations. So we're not, I'm not sure, I don't think we're obligated to provide it, but it's a convenience right now that also benefits the neighborhoods.
okay. And then in option number 2, this has 101 parking spaces. So we've
It's
lost,
exactly the same amount.
no, you
No,
have
it's
161 existing parking
Oh, right.
spaces on campus.
So this is fewer than you have existing, but it meets the program.
It meets the program requirements,
Right.
and what it doesn't meet is events.
Exactly,
So if you have a big council meeting or a library program.
right, where you get 200 people coming, you know, that's where you might see some street parking happen.
So in the underground parking, will you have an elevator?
You would have to, yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, so in the two, so that's why the underground parking is shown only in option 1, where we have the biggest building footprint that we are already doing multi-story. So if you're going to put it in an elevator, you get the most bang for your buck out of it.
So after you did your interviews and your site planning or whatever, what working number did you guys come up with for parking spaces that you kind of were working with?
there's 78, I believe, is what the program requires, so that takes care of staff parking, that takes care of visitor parking, people coming to get permits, et cetera.
Police parking,
Police parking, and police have some pretty unique parking requirements.
and, you know, the day-to-day public parking. But like Matthew said, it doesn't take care of the large parking. And so once we hit that target, we're trying to maximize whatever else we could fit on the site reasonably.
So in option 2, you've got 3 library buildings.
Yes, And so the idea is just to get a sense of how that might be broken up based on the program as we've seen it is, what might go in this building could be like the collection.
Heritage.
Yeah, the heritage collection, it could be a reading area, and then in the biggest block, or it could be the multi-purpose space for the big reading room. It's big enough to meet your program, you know, and that would be all it would be. There wouldn't be any support in it, it would just be a space. The big part of the building would be all your stacks, all your reading rooms, you know, all the other bits of program. The other smaller square building would be like maybe the offices and other storage support spaces. It's a thought to just keep it feeling smaller. It's not like it had to be the plan, but it's just in order to kind of put something out there.
More of a campus feel.
Mm-hmm.
On the parking, when you talk about existing programs, did you factor in the future train station being open up for service?
Wherever we could, we were always trying to put some parking along Station Lane.
And matched with the existing parking
Right.
is within their right of way.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't clear to us is there a joint operating agreement with the city and what their demand is for stations, parking, and how often is that station used? So the educated guess was to match existing showing their right of way.
The other last point about option 2 is you'll see that there isn't a public works yard. This would be, you know, saying, okay, you know, is this something that you want on your civic center site as a priority, or do you want to explore housing your courtyard functions, the storage and yard functions somewhere else? If this option were the chosen option, one place that we would consider putting the courtyard is where you see the little dogleg parking area off of Ashfield in that corner where the communication tower is right now, and screening it.
And so option 2 here, this parking near the train station most closely mirrors what we have out there now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are the
Something to
highlights of
react to.
option 2. Option 3 is a slightly different take on, it's sort of combining aspects of option 1 and 2, but the major features are Ashfield Road goes all the way through and tees into Station Lane, instead of bending around to the left and connecting with Fair Oaks. And then you continue to put some convenience parking along Ashfield Road as it goes between the clusters of buildings. In this case, the council chambers is maintained, it's renovated and enlarged as necessary to continue to be the council chambers. The library, you know, just kind of fans out, it's remaining 1 story, you know, we just want to kind of keep it fanned out along the garden side. And there's a portion of the police and city administration building that's 2 stories, but the rest is trying to stay 1 story as it's on flanking either side. All parking is surface parking in this one. We are moving the station again here so that we can regularize the road as it meets Fair Oaks. And Public Works, you can see, is down in that corner. In this case, it is shown here where that communications tower is as part of option 3. And we put as much parking as we could along Station Lane as well for both serving the city functions and parking for the station.
And one other thing we tried to be very subtle about, but there's those little X's through there.
Yeah, those are,
Trees that are going to be, because of these, the layout are going to have to be removed. They're either beneath the building, they're in the drive, they're in the paved surface, paved area, or they're going to be so heavily impacted by new construction that their health is going to be compromised. And on this scheme, there's, you know, the heritage, what I would describe as the heritage trees are these 2 deodars right out front of the door. And then there's a couple of oaks over on the other side of the Public Works facility, which are signature elements of the existing campus.
So everything that has an X on it, little dot with an X, are removed trees?
Yes.
So even in your option 2, keeping the council chambers where it is, there's an X at the.
Yeah, you know, those little ones, you know, we can adjust the pavement on that scheme. I think we got a
It's
little-
because of pavement, right?
Yeah, it's, you know,
So
that one's
that-
a pedestrian pavement, that could change.
Yeah, that would,
And and Matthew, just, where there are other X's where it looks like there's just pavement, are those adjustable as well?
It just depends on the extent of pavement that we
Okay.
have in those areas. You know, in this scheme, we wanted to have a very clear relationship
Right.
with the train station, but as you look to Central Plaza, you can see there's circles around those trees, and we could treat those trees in the same way. And definitely the grid pavement is a pedestrian pavement, and there is room for adjustment on that.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I would say in all the schemes, that it's more diagrammatic to distinguish pedestrian paved area versus vehicular area, rather than this is exactly the final form it's going to take, but it's to give people a sense of, these are the zones that we would consider the walking and the pedestrian or the gathering zones. The final design can take all kinds of shapes and form. I mean, it can be more
Absolutely.
organic and curvy, and it could be anything, but this would be the zone that we've defined as pedestrian.
So in option 3,
Mhm.
if you look at the two-story building,
Mhm.
which is, I guess, where storage would be, so it would be connecting to both of the other buildings on the single story, right?
Yeah, generally, that's the idea, that the single story would go all the way through, and just that middle portion would have a top story.
Okay.
One overall question for all of the police parking.
Mm-hmm.
There are two different kinds of police parking.
Yes,
There's their cars.
yes.
There's the police cars, there's the employee cars, and there's the we tow this car, or it's crime, it's a crime
Impounded.
scene.
Right.
Impounded. Where do those go?
In option 3, I mean, you were making a lot here, right?
Yeah,
And some
Next
of
to
these,
Fair Oaks?
yeah.
yes,
Fair
yes.
Oaks.
So
And,
is
you
that
know,
fenced in? Is it?
it would be
Yes.
fenced,
It'd be
it would have to be
secured parking.
screened.
Would it be screened?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Heavily screened.
Is that big
Yes.
enough? Doesn't look
Uh,
like
It looks a little small.
It's gonna be tight, and we are constrained by the buildings and the site plan. You know, we're definitely looking for input, especially from the police chief on the operational needs.
It's a pretty big number. It's at least 21 or 25 spaces. It was a big number.
It is in the program, so I
Yeah.
think what we're finding is the surface parking schemes are more challenging to accommodate
Very
the
challenging.
fully secured lot
Right.
on the surface in one zone that you can secure. So definitely, we are seeing in the totally surface parked schemes that it is a little more challenging to be able to find that piece of land that groups all those cars together. It's not that it's not solvable, but, you know, we're seeing those challenges.
If I may make a suggestion on option number 1, we have this zone down to the south right here,
Yeah.
which, you know, probably we've got a parking lot in there in option number 2.
Right.
And if that meets your operational needs, it's not immediately adjacent to your facilities, but that could be used for secure parking back in there.
If we were gonna park just staff and the police only underground, how many spaces is that?
78.
78.
No, just for the police.
Just for the police?
No, and
He-
staff.
He said staff.
Yes.
Just police staff?
No.
No.
All
Staff.
staff?
All staff.
Oh, right,
What
that's
about-
78.
Yeah, well, that
And
includes
the reason I'm
visitors though, too.
asking is
Oh.
obviously parking underground is very expensive, but in my experience, employees tend to want to park under the
Right,
building,
and public doesn't.
and the public
Public
doesn't.
doesn't.
It's about 60 without public spaces for each department, right? So
Yeah.
there's like there's a handful for each department that said this is kind of our
That includes the
daily
police?
flow.
78 includes the police.
78 includes police secured, police staff, and daily visitor
And
counts.
so, let's just take the number, 30,000 would be generous, it'd be a huge number, but it's not a very big garage, it's not gonna be very efficient. So
You're
that's
right.
about, is 30,000 times 80, 2.4 million?
Yeah, I mean,
So it's not insane for this project.
Well,
It's
Well,
not
one of
crazy
the-
because it makes
right.
the project.
But one of the things that I'm noticing here, and that I think that it just seems like there's so much hardscape all around the buildings, and
Mhm.
people have indicated, at least to me, that one of the things they like about our current building is the ability, you know, park real close to the
Right.
the police department or the post office, hop out, run in, and if they have to park, you know, like in option 3, all the way by the
Yeah.
railroad and walk, you know,
Oh,
a
no, there's
mile.
parking all along, all the way up the middle. There's convenience parking all in here.
There's parking all.
And you can go
But-
straight
You
in.
just
Oh,
can't
no.
have your staff parking.
No, but still, you've gotta, if you park along Station Lane, you've gotta walk through and then go into here.
Well,
go through-
3 is like what we
or
have
Ashfield.
now. In fact, there's more parking that's convenient in 3
Right.
than we currently have.
3 is modeled basically
that's-
on existing
And
conditions.
there's a
Yeah.
lot more parking in 3. So can we respond to some of these?
Yeah,
'Cause
so
Shall
what
we be
we're,
I have
organized
things
about
to
it?
respond to.
Yeah,
So everybody
Plan
has
by
a
plan,
chance.
maybe.
so
Can we
I guess
ask
what I'd like
you
to
about
kind
it?
of set the context for comments too, because, you know, our goal is to, test a series of ideas, make sure we have the right things on the table for people to react to. And so I definitely want to hear if you feel that we are missing something we should show on at least one of the schemes. I want to hear if something just seems, you know, so unacceptable, we should not keep that move in any scheme. And, you know, general thoughts on, you know, just refinements that would help people understand each option.
So why don't we go option by option?
Yes.
And give you feedback.
Okay,
So I would just,
let's just go around the table, so that everybody has an opportunity to speak. So, Rose, would you like to start?
Sure, option 1, what is designated for that space off of Ashfield Road? And other options, you have parking there. What's the intent?
That's just green space
Yeah,
on this particular scheme.
trying to maintain as more
Yeah.
green space.
And it's adjacent to a private residence.
Right,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
buffer.
Trying to keep a big buffer there.
Okay. And the underground parking concept, you know, I was at the public outreach. Did that concept come up at all? Did you throw that out to people, and what was their response, if they didn't mind, or?
The group that was in that room were the advocates for it, and their vision was if we stick it underground, we free the surface for green open space, and we centralize all of our programmatic elements, built elements on top of the garage, and we gain a lot of efficiencies by doing that.
Well, my problem with option 1 is the parking does not seem that accessible to the people. You know, I see the parking, some spaces to the south of the complex, and then some along the railroad, and then I guess presumably underneath. So walking to the library or doing a quick run through to the town for some business, can you trace what people would be doing, where they would be parking? Would they be parking across the street from Station Lane and walking across the street to conduct their business, like at the post office?
Yeah,
Is that
what
intent?
what our vision or thought was, is that since Asheville connects, that if there's already, people are used to traveling along Asheville, they could come here, they have this drop-off area right here, and they can immediately walk into the administrative building and get to those uses.
Okay. Well, if that's the major drop-off area, I would suggest making that drop-off area,
Larger,
yeah, larger.
more
Yeah,
spaces.
because the few, I agree, that seems the most convenient, rather than parking in the, behind on Station Lane and coming across, that seems the
Right.
obvious. So I would suggest making that parking
Sure.
drop-off
Okay.
larger. And presumably the library, you're adding some space for the community center, the proposed
Yes.
community center there. Okay. I mean, I don't wanna take the whole time. Under-
So that's, option 1 comments then.
Yeah, just to create a larger drop-off space, with the space where people conduct their business, come in, drop off, come in and go to the police or to the post office. I think that needs to be quite larger. Oh, one more question. This back area, what's the intent of that space back there behind the berm and between the berm and the railroad tracks? What happens there?
The the Public Works Maintenance Center is back there, and that one of the ideas that came out of the public workshops was the idea of using the earth to screen the railroad tracks and provide sound attenuation and also visually block it. So we have diagrammatically sketched in the berm there. It gets pretty tight back in that area, especially if we don't try to do it without walls. One strategy would be to put a wall on the railroad side and then gently berm up so it's not such a dominant feature. But then you get the sound and you get the visual blocking of that space. And there's also those two dots you see, those are some really nice oak trees which are in the existing courtyard and have managed to survive some pretty large amount of
Large
pavement.
canopy, huh?
Yeah, they're significant trees, so we're hoping we could liberate them and give them a second life.
And can you create some parking spaces closer to the library too? Is that
Yeah.
just the?
We could.
Yeah, we could, it just, we start to bump up against, it's a balancing act
Right,
between
right,
the
I
trees and,
know.
we actually had a scheme where we flipped the parking on Station Lane, and you could come in Station Lane and park on either side, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of an idea that might be.
Down in
good.
here, you can get more surface parking. We were also taking this to kind of its theoretical maximum, put all that parking in the garage and let's free up the ground plane as much as possible.
Right, I understand that, but I think, to these particular buildings, sometimes just as convenience parking.
Totally.
Just adding some would be
Yep.
helpful.
Yep.
Are you talking about around that circle on that side of making parking on?
I'm not dictating where,
Station
but just
Lane.
something more convenient to the library that, people know that it's, when they make a quick trip there, it's not,
Sure.
I have to park underneath the garage, take the
Right.
elevator up, walk
I
across.
totally agree.
No.
Yeah, I think that.
Okay.
Phil, do you want to go next?
Yeah.
Number one?
Every one of these has multiple trees removed,
Yes.
and I think that's a mistake. Our general plan says it's urban, we're gonna protect the trees, we have great tree regulations. I think we ought to do some things about turning the buildings in certain angles to save those trees, particularly the big oaks. Ones along over here by the railroad track, that's a great screen, why take it down? That's one thing. In Plan 1, it looks like everybody lined it up on an axis, and I think they should be changed in different directions, more like item 3 is concerned. I think the underground parking is a good idea on all cases.
Okay.
Okay.
Steve?
Number one to me feels the most like a civic center, just because it's more united. That said, I don't know, I think the amount of traffic between the library and the other buildings is gonna be minimal. So we dedicated a lot of space to a plaza with no parking in it, and I don't, that for me is the biggest struggle in the whole thing, is deciding, should Ashfield stay connected to Station Lane? Because if you do, you can dump a lot of parking there for the library, council chambers, surface parking that people can use to go in, guests and visitors. And there won't be a lot of traffic between those two users. It's just gonna be very minimal amount of people walking, and we could do something very well demarcated that's safe and pleasant to go through if we did. So number one. Number two is, it's always tough to have parking fields that are not united. When you go to a building, you gotta pick A or B, and if you're wrong, you're mad, and you go back out to the street, you go to the other one. So whatever scheme we do, I think the parking fields need to be done in a flow. So on this one, somehow Station Lane needs to be linked over to Ashfield, and whether that's through, on this one, either surface from Ashfield to Station, or the parking garage would need an entry on the other side. So if you come down Station Lane and it's full, then you pull under the, you pull into the parking garage or something, so you're not going back out to Fair Oaks and back in the other way. I think where that building currently is, we should use it for something. It could be overflow parking, is my instinct, but maybe that's wrong. I like that Public Works is sort of walled off over there. I don't know if it works for staff, but it's nice for this purpose. We'd have to find out how they feel about that. I would move it just feels better where that station is moved to a common drop-off location. You have the station here in its old location. It's not really clear where you pull up and, do a kiss kiss and go, or, you know, whatever it is, and this isn't so obvious to me, I had to pick somebody up. Whereas if you move the station over like in the other schemes where it's near a nice drop off, I think that's smart. Yeah, those are my big, I don't know that you have to force Ashfield out to Fair Oaks. It looks good on a plan, but I don't know if it's necessary.
We understood at the public meeting, there were some comments we got that this was also a very dangerous intersection because it's offset and people can't see. So we thought if we're going to do anything that takes Ashfield and bends it through, it would be best to have it align instead of the way it is now.
Yeah, but I'm just saying if we're gonna keep station, I don't know that this is necessary. If this is the only way in and out, then I think it's safer, but if this is here, I don't know that this makes it a lot better.
That was.
Station lane is not going through on option one.
Right.
But it comes out to Fair Oaks.
Right.
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
just a cul-de-sac though.
Having
But-
two
but
curb
he
cuts
was
at
saying-
Fair Oaks, I
he was
don't know is a
saying-
good idea.
I think he was saying to connect
Oh, I know.
it with Ashfield.
No, what I'm saying is this looks nice on the plan, but if you have both of these, I don't know that it's gonna be materially safer.
Right, okay, but
It just
then,
become two curb cuts very close to each other where lots is gonna be normal. If you can get it down to one curb cut, then this is gonna be far safer to have Fair Oaks Lane, Ashfield Lane. But if you can't get rid of Station Lane, I'm not sure that is anything. It's just more activity happening in a little space.
What the idea was is that Ashfield serves as kind of the back door every day, and it's also the garage entries.
Yeah.
We've got a ramp down to those buildings. We're gonna have, because these buildings aren't gonna get cross ventilation, we're also gonna have a lot of duct work and that's gonna come with this garage. So we could take that garage and flip it so that you can't, so you come in off.
No, I get it. But all I'm saying is that if you do that, when you create this plan, the shortcoming is you've got parking that's gonna go for the train. You gotta figure out how to park the library and public
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, I agree.
These people are gonna come, it's gonna be full, they're gonna be upset, they're gonna U-turn, they're gonna come out to Fair Oaks, they're gonna double the traffic on Fair Oaks. Come back in, you can get, not seeing
Yeah,
up
I
here.
think the point of a connection
Yeah.
through to the garage is probably in this
Yeah.
scheme the best idea,
Yeah.
so that they can see that they can make the loop, they didn't find anything, they can go down to the garage and find something, and they can still come out the other side or the same side. I think that's probably in this particular scheme, the way to remedy that issue. What I wanna be sure and do is, I think all these schemes can be massaged to address specific problems, and all of them have things that we don't like, but what I wanna do is still keep them as distinct as possible with their flaws, so that we are finding out, what are the big drivers in the end. When people have to choose what's most important, I wanna make sure that we kind of preserve those differences as best as possible in each scheme. So in this one, I agree, I think we do need to show a way out, because we've made those two, that dead end, and I think through the garage is probably the best way.
No, I get it, you wanna see
Yeah.
how important this public quality is.
Exactly,
Yeah.
so each one is gonna bring up different concerns from each of the groups that see it. So I wanna deal with things inherent to the scheme that we've missed, like some of you are pointing out, and I think that we wanna address something that is companionable with the scheme. I don't wanna try and start to modify schemes to start looking like each other. So that's what I'm gonna be listening for, just so you guys know.
okay,
Well, I
we're
don't
doing
like,
number one
number one,
only,
number one.
yeah.
I don't like underground parking. And my reason is, many of the visitors to this complex are here for a very short time. They come, they go to the post office, or they go to the police, or they go somewhere, they're here maybe 15, 20 minutes. I think there's going to be a lot of resistance to the underground parking, taking an elevator, coming up. Not really what I would call friendly. And therefore, I would say, I would vote to eliminate the underground parking. Then the next thing is, just to some extent, adding to Rose's comment, the same thing with the library, people want to park near the library. there's not much parking shown here for the library. And people come to the library, they pick up a newspaper, or they drop a book off, or something. You know, they may only be there for 5 minutes or less. And I think they want to be able to park somewhere close.
Yeah, I think that's another good comment that, this scheme did make some attempts to have some convenience parking, and we really didn't do it for the libraries. I think it's reasonable in this scheme to make sure that we put some in each of the locations to serve the buildings, so that the scheme has a completeness about it in that regard, and one building isn't treated less fairly than the others with convenience parking. So I think that's a good comment.
The next thing I have, of course, I have some questions about replacing the present council chambers. And, you know, I'm not sure I'm against it, but I certainly think it's something we have to really think about very carefully, because to some extent, this is an image of Atherton right here. You know, it's not a great building, but of course it can be modified and improved. And it gives us a little bit of an image, whereas some of the other buildings, like the police department, don't have any image whatsoever. In fact, it's all negative. But this does have a, people look at this and say, oh, that's nice, this is Atherton, etc. Then the next question is, to some extent, echoing what I think the whole traffic situation has to be thought about a little more carefully. Because if I lived on Maple or one of these other streets here, clearly cutting off Station Lane makes access a lot more difficult. So these are my comments.
Okay, so why don't we go over to Paul and then Clyde?
Okay, and again, just looking at option one, I would reiterate Phil's comments about the trees, especially the huge oak over by the train station, which is slated for removal on this option. As far as the underground parking is concerned, kind of listening to Steve saying, and through your